I wasn't at all prepared, sorry. Hi. I have three that I've chosen for you from three different books. This one is from the volume one of every event of the year, January through June. And I've had people purchase it and say that they're reading it and they're just stunned that from day to day, they're like, it's just crazy because you go from one to the next and there's a different theme. And I said, of course, you've got different events that happen every single day and everything is, all topsy-turvy and you've got to guess when you're writing every day of the year how to do that. But this one was written on June 22nd, and a lot of different things happened that day. So this one is called On This Day. On this day, the Romans defeated Macedonia. On this day, the Catholic Church forced Galileo to denounce his heliocentric worldview. On this day, Adolf Hitler made the fatal mistake to attack his ally, a sleeping giant. On this day, the Bionic Woman was born. On this day, toxic fog from an Icelandic volcano spread past France, leading to their revolution and killing tens of thousands in every European country. On this day, a girl who was so unusual was born, and she just wanted to have fun. On this day, Checkpoint Charlie, the crossing point between East and West Berlin, was dismantled. On this day, one spirit came into existence who would shatter people's minds when it came to deathly illness or racism or sexism. But I still contend that it's just a day. Who cares about a day that people are born? As far as I know, people don't congregate at hospitals to stream with streamers and champagne to celebrate the arrival of someone who is yet to live. So, as I said, why celebrate these occasions? Because it's just a day. I started looking through books to find different things to read, and this book is called A Year-Long Journey of the last year of features that I had in Chicago before moving to Austin, Texas. So there are some strange, long, weird ones in here, and I'm going to start with this one. I won't tell you about the show, I guess, but this is called 8 to 16. You came back again from one of your trips to the other side of the planet. You know I love you more than anything on Earth, but I'm getting used to your absence. It's a terrible thing to say, I know, but when you came back this time, you said that you had a fever. I figured you ingested some other toxic water and you'd have the stomach flu for days, but then you'd just be fine. But this time, with your fever, I remembered how you drank the water swimming south of the equator, and I thought nothing of it. It would clear up in a week. I'll just hold off on kissing you again. But after 8 days, you went to the doctor, and they told you, you told them of your travel and ails. And that's when the doctors called the CDC and the federal agencies swarmed in. After you left the doctor, the next contact I had was with men in hazmat suits at my door. They asked me if I was alone. They asked me if I had any children. Then they asked me to come with them. I told them that I needed to wait for my husband, and they then told me that you were now in isolation. 3, After hours, they told me that you caught a nasty virus while you were away on your trip. But I said, oh, wait a minute. He's been on these work trips before, and his company made him take all of the tons of drugs and medications to take so that he would be immune and he wouldn't catch anything. And that's when they stopped me, right there. They locked me in a room. They told me I couldn't leave. And then they said that he had caught a bad strain while helping a woman he found on the street, bleeding, pregnant, and in pain. And so it took them 2 days to discover the details before they gave me the news. He's in isolation. We're trying new treatments, and hopefully he'll be okay. But I know of this virus. It's usually lethal, so please, let me see him now. And that's when I said, sorry, it's out of our hands, but you must be quarantined too. So I screamed at the medics, all to no avail, and they all swore that I had to stay safe. So I paced in my isolation. I watched the drive-by news, and I heard them say stats that death from this virus can come from 8 up to 16 days. 8 to 16 days. It had been 8 days before he even went to the doctor. Was this waiting? Is that actually going to do him in? I couldn't talk to him. I couldn't see him. I couldn't kiss him or tell him that I love him, that I'll always love him, that I'm nothing without him. The morning of the 5th day, still trapped in isolation. That's when they told me he died. My blood work was clear, but they kept me in isolation when they said they'd have to cremate my love. And all I could think was, after you're done, send him to Arlington National Cemetery so that the world would know he was a hero to more than just me. You kept me away from him until he died. And still, I continue to pace, trapped in this room, alone, with nothing to wait for, ever again. Reflection and remembrance of that. And they said it was 8 to 16 days and somebody will die from it. And so I just did this, and I just made that up. I made that up.
I write fiction all the time.
But very powerful. And it's very realistic of things that have actually happened with others, or blah, blah, blah. So the last one I'm going to read, look at me. I am going to, yay!
I think we have time.
Yay, I think you might have time. I want to hear you read more. I would like to read to you a poem from a book called The Chosen Few. This was a book that Scars Publications released for select 2012 to 2015 writings from features, local poets and features, at the Chicago Open Mic, the Cafe Gallery. It was something that I ran for years there. It was the only open mic that had a podcast, because I recorded the open mics and features. And I think this is hysterical, because I only did this till 2015. I asked my husband to see if he can research to see if anybody actually ever downloads 20 minutes or an hour and a half long file, right? You know, as a podcast, because I would think, poetry, you're kidding me, right? And so he looked at it and he said, well, if I get out the spammers, it looks like one is downloaded every hour and a half. Like 24/7. That often, I'm like, what?
That's not bad.
No, for getting what, I'm like, you're kidding me. That was amazing. So it was very cool, and it was sad to see that I had to shut it down right before moving here. But it was a reflection of things that were podcasts that people actually downloaded, which blows my mind. It totally blows my mind. But I will share with you one from a past feature that I had over those years there, and I had written poems for every element in the periodic table, and I've got one of them in here for you, and I'd like to share it with you, and it's Einsteinium. Einsteinium. Einstein understood that everything was relative. Why did he have to worry about brushing his hair or changing out of his pajamas when he was busy grappling with the foundations of physics? And once he fathomed that relationship between matter and energy, once he understood the interconnectivity between matter and energy, he suddenly understood, after this Jewish physicist left his home in Germany, that Hitler and the Third Reich could be working on an atomic bomb, converting so little matter into so much devastating energy. At this time, he understood the need for Roosevelt to create this weapon so the Germans wouldn't destroy us. The gravity of his discovery in the hands of evil men weighed him down. And even months before he died, Einstein wrote that although the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki seemed unfathomably horrific, and he regretted having to write that letter to Roosevelt, his justification was the threat of Germany. When he wrote that letter, he still had to appeal to Roosevelt that yes, to save us from Germany, this weapon needed to be created. Knowing about his torment in making this decision to ask for the creation of the atomic bomb makes it so ironically beautiful that after scientists discovered an element after the first explosion of the hydrogen bomb, they named the element Einsteinium after the physicist. How ironically beautiful. Einsteinium is a silvery radioactive synthetic element with a high fission rate, like the atomic bomb. Einstein first knew of when he feared his homeland's enemy. But because of the short half-life of all isotopes of Einsteinium, all primordial Einsteinium is decayed by now, and beyond what is nuclear creation. There's absolutely no use for any isotopes in Einsteinium instead of basic scientific research, which makes me think of the life of Albert Einstein, I suppose. For although Einstein worked at odd jobs for years, until he was a patent examiner, his mind was only good at one thing, doing not so basic scientific research, solving scientific fundamental puzzles, if only he had the time to study the puzzle long enough.
Kuypers.
I was just excited thinking that it wouldn't be freezing today, and that's why I've got pants on. Because I got these Simpsons pants, and they just say, I am so smart, SMRT. Because the show, he got all excited because he graduated high school, and he was dancing around singing, I am so smart, SMRT. It's the funniest thing. And when I saw these, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to get them. I just thought that was just too much. SMRT. And I think he burned his diploma. He's like, yeah, I've got it now. I can
That's right, you don't need it anymore.
Anyway, why am I talking about The Simpsons? I am so smart. SMRT. Hello, I'm going to read to you a poem from the book Every Event of the Year, Volume 1, January through June. And this was actually for Chocolate Chip Day, I believe. And so I will share with you this poem called Empty Chocolate Counter. I used to save what change I could when I was little, and I'd ride my bike to the Plush Horse ice cream parlor to get a scoop of their chocolate chip ice cream. That's chocolate ice cream with chocolate chips. But once I actually got a job there, older boys, only boys were allowed to scoop the ice cream there. But it was under new management, the brother of the owner of Dove Chocolates. They took over, and I was hired to work at their brand new candy counter. So now, for the first time, this ice cream parlor was open year-round, and I was there to sell chocolate. So, in the winter, it's safe to say, it wasn't very busy. I was there in the winter to sell chocolates to no one, along with the designated male ice cream scooper. Now, I couldn't get away with eating their individual chocolates for sale there. They keep track of their inventory, but their ice cream, made in the back room, was harder to keep track of. So every time I worked in the winter, I made myself a 24-ounce chocolate chip shake out of the chocolate ice cream with chocolate fudge, extra fudge, of course. But one Tuesday night in February, I was sitting in the chair behind my counter with my precious chocolate ice cream and chocolate chip shake with fudge. My shake was in my hand, and the side door opened right in front of my counter. And that's when the owner came walking through the door. So I stashed my shake under the counter and I stood up at attention. "Hello, how are you, sir?" I asked, and he just mumbled he was fine, and he walked back to his office. Phew. But another day at work with the boss, while deliveries were dropped off, I picked up a larger box and the owner just stopped me. Wait, that's heavy. You shouldn't carry that." And I laughed, explaining I can carry 50-pound salt blocks for a water softener, that I'm fine. And I think that maybe him seeing that women can stand up for themselves made it okay, in the heat of summer, when the lines were out the door for ice cream, for me to leave the empty chocolate counter and be the first girl there to ever scoop ice cream with the big boys. Looking back, you may say that I'm some feminist pioneer by being the first female to scoop ice cream there. When I look back, though, I don't see it that way. I just remember homemade chocolate chip ice cream with chocolate chips, molasses bits, and added fudge. And that, my friends, was whipped into a perfect shake, no matter which gender did the work. And I've got another, and I'm totally switching gears with this one. This is from the last Chicago Performance Art years, before I moved here to Austin. This is from a book called A Year-Long Journey. And this was from a show at Cafe Baloo, I believe. Not that any of you know where that is in Chicago. But this is a poem that I haven't read in a long time called Lord Have Mercy. Looked into the coffin of a man who was once great. At least that's what I hear. But the cancer ravaged him until his bones crumbled to dust. The family then worried how the people at the funeral home would make him look more like him. And as the family walked into the room, they held their breath for more reasons than death, for more reasons than their last viewing of the man they lost, now once again with meat on his bones. When the services started, we all had to follow the Reverend's laments by all periodically proclaiming, "Lord, have mercy." The man with the collar would talk, and I would wonder what it would be like to hold the job of applying makeup to the dead to try to make them look not so dead. Puff the cheeks, apply face paint to give them color. Lord, have mercy. Beforehand, a string of older firemen came to us before the coffin with small black bands around each of their badges. When the fire station started, quote, before the town even had a fire station, he used a red truck with ladders tacked to the side and a trailer to haul a barrel of water. Lord, have mercy. The man with the collar started a hymn. Everyone in the small room knew the lines and sang along like little lemmings, and I tried to remember the lines from my childhood that I have no reason to say except when people need something, anything to make them think their life doesn't have to end. Lord, have mercy. The man with the collar reminded the room that people were created for life, that death was not a part of the plan, but stifle the overwhelming desire to caress the one you loved, now in a coffin, for the coldness would be too stark of a reminder. Lord, have mercy. I wanted to try to look into the coffin from different angles. Maybe then the deceased wouldn't look so, it would look more real. Maybe I wouldn't see his lack of hair from the chemo gone wrong. Maybe then I wouldn't see his hands clasping the rosary beads. Lord, have mercy. I remember this string of people waiting to meet us before they proceeded to the coffin, which reminded me of the procession of people waiting to congratulate a bride and groom immediately after the wedding ceremony. But in this macabre receiving line, all of the funeral attendants were repeatedly saying to us, "I'm sorry for your loss." And I wonder how many times the man in the coffin had to say those words in his lifetime of service. How hollow these words were when he spoke them, when the words that seemed so stifling. And I think of how people say this when nothing can express how anyone is feeling, especially when people don't know how to even feel anymore. Lord, have mercy. The chants now ended. The Knights of Columbus stopped their constant repeated prayers for the painted man in the coffin to help us justify the pain we don't know how to deal with. Lord, have mercy, is all I could think. Not to call a higher power, but to give empty words at an empty time with too many injustices in the living death scene. We're all players in this charade, making up death in a way that we want to believe is not ghoulish, that we want to keep telling ourselves, unless we choose to ignore the macabre while unsettled lives are still around us. We mourn or cry, and we try to fit the pieces into what we call life. And for those who believe, and even for those who don't, these words seem to be the only fitting words to think or to feel. Lord, have mercy. Well, it was, and so I thought I'd keep it on a weird, I wasn't trying to keep it on that kind of theme, but I was going to read to you a poem from the cc&d recreation of a May 2008 issue. I tell people online, because this has gone into books since 2014, that if anybody wants one of the older ones redone, we're happy to do it. I'm happy, and it's happened twice, and this is one of them, and I love this cover. Just kills me that this happens to be the cover of volume 184, and this one is now in a book that is titled "That Was the Time," and this is from supplement section in the back of it, and it is called Andrew Hettinger. I never really liked you. You never revealed yourself to me, and why would you? You who never wanted and never had anyone. You who always had the bad breaks. Everybody looked at you as different. Where would you have learned to trust? Who would you have learned it from? I never really liked you. I met you through a friend. Well, he explained to me that multiple sclerosis left you with a slight limp and a faint lisp. A faint under the surface, but there, traces of something no one would ever know of you well enough to fully understand. I never really liked you. You never revealed yourself to me, and I never wanted you to. You scared me too much. You plagued with physical ailments. You with a limp in your walk. You with a patch over your eye. You who always stared at me for just a little too long. They told me that the patch was from an eye surgery with complications, and now you had to cover up your shame, cover someone else's mistakes, cover up a wrong that you didn't commit, cover a problem that was not of your doing. The problems were never of your own doing, were they? I heard these stories and I thought that they were sad. I heard these stories and thought that you had to be a pillar of strength. And then I'd saw you drink straight from the bottle, 15-year-old Chianti, and I saw you smash your hand into your living room wall. This was how you lived. The house you lived in was littered with trash. Why bother to clean it up anyway? It detracted you from the holes in the wall, the broken furniture from drunken fits. This was how you lived. This was how you reacted to life, to the world. You didn't know any better. This was how you coped. I never really liked you. You would come home from work, tell us about a woman who was beautiful and smart and liked you, but she wasn't quite smart enough. And I thought, we believe anything if we tell ourselves enough. We weave these fantasies to get through the days. I never really liked you. Every time you talked to me, you always leaned just a little too close. So I stayed away from the house, noted that others whom you called friends did the same. I asked my friend why he bothered to stay in touch, and he told me, but he has no friends. This is how I thought of you. A man who was dealt a bad hand, a man who couldn't fight the demons that were handed to him. And with that, I put you out of my mind, relegated you to the ranks of the inconsequential. We parted ways. You were reduced to a sliver of my youth. I received a letter recently, a letter from somebody who knew you, someone who wanted me to tell my friend that they read in the newspaper that you hanged yourself. Your brother died in an electrical accident, and after the funeral, you went to the train station, and instead of leaving this room, this town, you went to a small room to the side, and you left us forever. Strangers had to find you. The police had to search through records to identify your body. The newspaper described you as having health problems, but you knew it was much more than that. And I was asked to be the messenger to my friend. The funeral had already passed. You were already in the ground. There was no way he could say goodbye. I shouldn't have to give him this news. I shouldn't have to be the one to tell him. No one deserved to tell him. He was the only one who tried to care. I never really liked you. No one did. But when I had to tell my friend, I knew his pain. I knew he wanted to be better. I knew he thought you were too young to die. I knew he felt guilty for not calling you. He knew it shouldn't have been this way. We all knew it. I never really liked you, but now I can't get you out of my mind. You haunt me for all of the people we've forgotten in our lives. I don't like what you've done. I don't like you quitting. I don't like you dying, not giving us the chance to love you or hate you or ignore you more. My friend still doesn't know where your grave is. I'd like to find it for him and take him to you. Let him know that you did have a friend out there. Bring you a drink, maybe, a fitting nightcap to mark your departure, to commemorate a life filled with liquor, violence, pain, and death. I never really liked you, but maybe we can get together in some old cemetery, sit on your gravestone, share a drink with the dead, laugh at the injustices of life as we're surrounded by death. Maybe then we'd understand your pain for one brief moment and remember the moments that we'll always regret. And so he's like, hi, I just wanted to write to you. I'm a friend of his from high school, and that's really crazy, and I don't know where you are. I do know where the gravesite is. I'm like, really? And it was a 3-hour drive. We made the trip down there, and we all went to see his gravesite and hang out, and I read the poem there and hung out there. And my friend, I never saw him to be able to share that info with him about it, but I was at least able to go and see him at his gravesite, which is just the weirdest thing. You know, with this strange life that had gone on, that then somebody is like, oh, I'm a friend of this, and I know, and we'll meet up together and have Taco John's or something, and then we'll go hang out at a grave. So I actually have gone, since it was a very long ago piece, but it's just weird the connections that you can find and make, just from the strangest and weirdest of circumstances.
Did we drink wine there?
I think we brought a can of beer or something, and I think it poured a little
beer. Share a
drink with it, you know, just because that's what he was.
That's the kind of person he would have been. He would have been the one to want you to do that.
And so I was like, okay, here we go. It's the middle of the day, I'm like, we have some beer, you know. But I actually did do that. So, and it's just the weird confluence of events that comes together, and then somebody contacts me, and I actually do get to see it. But anyway, I'm trying to show some sort of weird closure with that thing. So.
No,
But it's fascinating, and hopefully I get a lot to hear from you. So I'll get your turn. We'll see. Please. Thank you. And this first one is from the book Every Event of the Year. This is volume 1, January through June. When you decide to write a poem every day of the year, you start looking for things. Well, what holidays or what kind of things? Oh, I've got sword swallowing day. I'll write about that, you know. And so you start doing things. And yes, I have something about sword swallowing day in this book.
Of course you do.
You search for things like this. One person was looking at it and he said, well, I don't agree with some of the stuff, but it was amazing. And I'm like, well, think of it this way. I was writing pieces for Lent, and somebody reading it was like, sounds like this was Jesus. And I'm like, I wasn't trying to do Jesus, but thank you very much. And then there was Atheist Pride Day, and I'm writing about, you know, so I'm going all over the place every day with a different thing for this book. And so we'll see what volume 2 will be like when it comes out in 2020. We'll see. But this one, I can't believe I'm going to read about it. Brace yourself. This was written on the day of the death of Pope John XII. Oh, brace yourselves. This one was called Vatican Turned into a Whorehouse. Oh, this is a story, trust me. When you think of the religiously pious, you might think of someone like the Pope, a pillar of piety, faith, chastity, and self-sacrifice, and devotion that millions of followers admire. But people who don't know their history might not know Pope John XII, who died when some 150 years ago in May. He became the Holy Father only as a teen because Octavius's father, the self-styled Prince of Rome, made the Roman nobles swear that his son would be the Pope once the living Pope died. And then when he did, Octavius became John XII, all while he was still less than 18 years old. Becoming Pope John XII didn't change Octavius, since he preferred living like a Chicago mob kingpin versus someone selflessly sacrificing in sacraments. For a few ideas of what made Pope John XII stand out, let's start out with the fact that he turned the papal palace into a whorehouse. He fornicated with concubines, widows, even his own niece. Living his whole life in vanity and adultery, he even castrated and murdered a cardinal. Then again, he blinded and murdered his confessor. He took money for ordaining bishops. Hey, that's beginning to sound more like ex-governors of mine in Illinois. He even ordained a 10-year-old as a bishop. And once he ordained a deacon in a stable. In a stable, what? All right. And this was the kind of pope that refused to make the sign of the cross. He toasted to the devil and invoked the name of pagan gods when playing dice games. And whenever he was unlikely, whenever he lost, unlike how many would think of the church now, he would use papal funds to pay off his debts. When he first became Pope, he worried about his enemies, so he formed an alliance with Otto I, the King of Germany. But under Otto's new title as the Roman Emperor, Otto realized that John was unreliable, immoral, and a crook. Those aren't my words. Those are actually the words of a historian and a professor. So Otto then deposed John from the papacy and put in a puppet pope. Yes, you heard me, a puppet pope. A puppet pope. But John, while in exile, recruited an army so that he could go back and reclaim his throne. Otto charged back to Rome to get rid of John once and for all, but by the time Otto got there, Pope John XII was already dead at age 29. There is no account of how Pope John XII actually died. Some wonder if an enraged husband exacted his revenge after catching John in bed with his wife, but Otto's historian postulated that the devil himself wanted one of his most faithful servants back at his side again. Well, either way, for these 9 years, this one man could truly be called the most wicked of popes. Now, most may say that Pope John XII was a robber and a murderer, but some may also forget that he actually worked reform in the church. And considering some of the improprieties ascribed to men of the cloth now, maybe that's not such a bad idea. Even if there is no salvation for Pope John XII, he's good to keep in mind when you think that you may have morally strayed.
Wow.
That's not what you think. No, it's not what you think.
Not the Holy Father.
No. Of course
He's
not.
infallible. Infallible, yes, definitely.
I would like to share with you a poem from the book A Year-Long Journey, which is about the last year of my performance art in Chicago before moving to this beautifully warm state. I think it's 94.
It's beautifully warm,
What?
that's for sure.
This was from a show. I did a couple of features at a Chicago Chi-Con science fiction shows. So I had to come up with poems for science fiction stuff. So I came up with some Star Trek stuff. And I have not shared this one with you, and I thought, why not? This poem is called Star Trek, Star Wars, and Stormtroopers. I heard another episode of Star Trek where they mentioned duranium, and so I looked it up online. Duranium is an extremely hard alloy used in starship hulls and handheld tools. But at the same time, Google listed a slew of links for the elusive duranium, and one of them was not for Star Trek, but for Star Wars. So I followed the link because there's a Wikipedia site for Star Trek Wiki. And so the Revenge of the Sith novel explains that duranium is stronger than either transparasteel or bronzium. I love the words that they come up with for this. Oh, I could go on and on about other details about this imaginary substance, but it just made me laugh when I hear terms used in Star Trek that were also used in Star Wars. Then, of course, my mind went to Star Wars again, because if you don't have a science fiction push for ideas, you might as well turn to history itself. Because the only difference between the Stormtroopers and Star Wars is that they wore white versus the Nazi brown-shirted Stormtroopers. Because like the Nazi SS, the brown shirts of the Stormtroopers did, when they all arrived en masse, made them all blend into one large force that no one individual could flee. I know, Stormtroopers in Star Wars covered their faces with their headgear, but that trick may have been the one thing to make the soldiers better than the SS. They could still say that they were only following orders. And this way, it's much easier to identify your enemy when you can't even see their face. I have no idea what I'm going to read, but I'm going to read to you a poem from the book That Was the Time, a recreation, 2019 recreation of a May 2008 issue of cc&d magazine. This is from one of the supplement sections in it, and it is a poem called Chess Game Again. We were all watching the case on the news together, a case where a man in a subway train opened fire on passengers in the car. 9 people dead, I think. They caught the man and they had their trial. And by right, he could have had a lawyer appointed to him, but no, he wanted to act as his own attorney. So every day, he would come into the courtroom in his suit, looking professional, and he would then question each one of the witnesses, the people who survived his shooting. They survived his shooting spree, and they now had to look him in the eye and answer his questions. So what happened then? The man would ask, and the woman would answer, I saw you push the woman to the ground, put your knee on her back, and then shoot her in the back of the head. Can you point out the man that did this? He would ask. And the man would say, it was you. Some of the witnesses broke down under the emotional strain, and finally he had no further questions, and the judge dismissed the jury to arrive at a verdict. They found him guilty, and when the judge asked the defendant if he had any last words for the jury, he kept stressing his innocence, and he never apologized. The judge told him that he was disgusted that he saw no remorse in this killer's eyes, and for all of the victims that we see in the media, for all of the court trials that were fed to us through our television sets, our boxes of American dreams, we don't think any of us were prepared for this. How did these people feel when faced with the man that had brought them so much pain? How did they feel when they had to quietly sit there and answer his questions when he didn't even say that he was sorry? Most of them sat there trying to keep their composure while faced with a man who lost all control. This twisted tale. They were all pawns in his chess game again. Well, you know, I haven't been reading ones that I've been writing lately because I'm trying to save them for the next Scars Publications book. But I have to write something for every day, and I wanted to share this one for you for today because today is Sweetest Day. Do you know what Sweetest Day is? No, because it's not like that well known. But then again, you didn't know Sword Swallowing Day was a day
No,
either.
I didn't know there was a sword swallowing day.
So
I knew there was a talk like a pirate day.
right, and so you can find the craziest something. But this is actually, and I knew of this one, and it is a poem that I wrote this morning. And it's for my sweetest. It's called Every Day is Sweetest Day. Concocted by candy makers, this Midwestern U.S. holiday was spearheaded by the Sweetest Day Committee, quote unquote, to give away boxes of candy. Since Sweetest Day was invented for companies to make more money, it has been branded a Hallmark holiday, even though Hallmark has nothing to do with it. And it's true, it's just another generic man-made holiday. But my first date with my first boyfriend was on Sweetest Day, and he took me to the nicest restaurant in town and treated me like a princess. So I may be biased. But if you meet that just right someone who will give you roses after knowing you for only 5 days, who will draw baths for you, who would carry you down a mountain, you may then start to wonder what you even need this Hallmark holiday for anyway. Every day is the sweetest day when you meet that just right someone. How sweet it is, indeed, when every day is the sweetest day. Because I said something to the effect of, I just don't want to I don't want to try to romanticize this generic holiday. But even Aristotle said that with romanticism, that it is a matter of not looking at how life is, but looking at how it should be and how it ought to be. And that's romanticism. So allow me to get romantic in talking about this idea. And so I made a point to go buy chocolates today because it's supposed to have something sweet. It's Sweetest Day. I don't know. I didn't have a plan. So anyway, so please read. I said, that I'm going to share with you a poem that appears in the book Every Event of the Year, Volume 1, January through June. And this one is actually written on the day. There were events that are covered, not just holidays. This was the day that communist governments took over Lithuania in 1940, right in the beginnings of World War II. It's called Vanquished by the Sleeping Giant. We draw strength from our past experiences when only light and truth could guide our steps. We have no choice but to remember our battles. We now dread what bloodshed may lay ahead when a sleeping giant just past our borders once again went in and took us over, nearly destroying us. We fought back then, recovered independence, wearily tethering our small state together again. Why must we fight such an unforgiving enemy? Why do we hold, who do you hold accountable for but a faceless face that we're supposed to revere as a supreme commander, as a supreme comrade? What more can we do to prove to you that it is we who should be treated with solemn respect, we with true dignity? Our people have fought you without question for far too many years, and now we live in a fractured society because of your reign. Wanting to take us over, you now provide this truly wicked, thinly veiled ultimatum to take us over, which only means you could infiltrate us, and we would have no choice at this point in the battle but to welcome you in. But it is you who do not understand. We could not in good conscience do this. If your war will continue to rage on, know that the battle will be ours in the end. They talk about the little ones winning the war, coming back from darkness when all seems lost. This is why I said past experience is where we draw strength. Only light and truth would guide us in our steps. We remember our battles. We stand proud of the past and our future, and we will always embrace our culture, our history, forever. Yeah, I'm a Dutch girl, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's my father's side. My mom was Lithuanian, and so it's sad because my mother's parents did not speak English. They died right when I was born. My mother knew Lithuanian and talked to them, and she forgot very quickly because she had no one around to talk about it. So I knew nothing. I only remember my father saying the only word I knew is milk because it was easy for milk, and that's the only one. It was the only one that he knew. But I think my mother's mother always made pickles, and that is why we are so crazy on making pickles. And you'd wait for a day, and then you'd start eating them, and they were like cucumbers still, because it hadn't been in long. But it was just like the coolest thing to be able to do, so sorry. All fond memories of grandparents that I never even met, which is very sad, but anywho. I'm going to share with you a poem from the year-long journey, which is the last year of my living in Chicago, where I had a lot of features because I was leaving. And there is a thing that happens in Chicago every year that is called the Poetry Bomb. That is the last Saturday in April. Or last Sunday in April. It starts at 3:30 in the afternoon, and you just find some place that you don't normally see have to deal with poetry, and you read poetry there. And so people will just pick locations. Oh, let's go to this park area and read. And a lot of people do the same place over and over again, and I'm always like, I'm going to go someplace different every single time. I'm going to go to the Lincoln Park Zoo. I'm going to go to, and in the last year, when nothing is going on with the season, and it was the year before the Cubs won, I stood outside of Wrigley Field and read a bunch of baseball-themed poems. Bases loaded, with a bunch of poems, and as soon as we moved, John's like, well, you know that you've moved, the Cubs are going to win, and they did the next year. which I find so funny. And so, because I'm not really a baseball fan, but it's just funny to me. So I'm going to share with you one poem that was in the baseball series from the chapbook Bases Loaded from the Poetry Bomb in 2015. And it is called Young Dreams from a Potential Legend. I started playing baseball with my friends when I was maybe 7. When I joined the team at school, and then later on, and you see, I was a pitcher, and because I was tall, I'd throw that ball and the batters were stumped. I played the minor leagues, and I did really well. At one point, I think the major leagues were looking at me like I could really have had a future in baseball. I was doing something I loved, and I was on top of the world. But one year, as I was pitching the ball while I'm playing baseball, it was like my shoulder just went out on me. It hurt so much that it became next to impossible to play baseball again. I mean, I know my mom had arthritis and it runs in the family, but I didn't think that when I was so young that it could affect me so. I was really enjoying what I was able to do, and just with the snap of my fingers, I had to stop. It's funny, I played baseball for years as I was growing up, but I think my dad came to my games less than half of the time. I know he traveled for his job, he had better things to do, but I really didn't know if he cared about my playing baseball or not. I mean, he later told me that he was really proud of everything that I did, but I never got that impression from him when I was young. Looking back, all I could think was that I was playing baseball, and when I played baseball, I could have been a legend, and my dad seldom saw my games. That's not about me. But anywho, I would like to share with you a poem from this reprinting of a cc&d alert issue. That was the time. Dun, dun, dun. That was the time. And this is from one of the supplements within it, and it is a poem called All of These Reminders. Look, over here, in my living room, you left an empty bottle of beer on the end table. The cap, too. And come here, follow me, over here, in the kitchen. Look here, see, you left some of your food in the pantry. A box of spaghetti, some canned tomatoes. And come here, into the bathroom. I know you probably won't notice this, but here, this towel, it smells like you. It smells like your aftershave. It smells like your shaving cream. Why did you have to go? Why does this have to seem so hard? Okay, look here. The remote for the TV is on the arm of the chair where you always leave it. And the cocktail table is pushed forward on one side because you could never rest your feet on it. Everywhere I look around me, I see something that you affected. I look in the kitchen. I look in the dining room. I look in the mirror. Why did you have to do this to me? Why couldn't you have made a clean break? There's still some of your messages scribbled on scraps of paper next to the phone in the kitchen. And look, the pillow on the couch is bunched up because you could never get comfortable with it. And over here, the phone books are out on the kitchen counter. You could never put them away, and here they are, still sitting out. And I have to put them all back in the cabinet again. And look, over here, why do I still have all of your love letters stuffed into drawers in my desk? When you left me, why did you have to leave me all these reminders? I'm going to share with you a poem from the book Every Event of the Year, Volume 1, January through June. Pick a day I may not have shared with anyone before. I'd like to share it with you, and this is for New Identity Day. It's June 20th, I believe, or the 21st.
You know all the holidays.
Well, I know that Juneteenth was on the 19th, and the next day is June 22nd, so it's either the 20th or 21st. So it says it in the table of contents, but I don't want to look that up. Like you guys care. Written for and on New Identity Day, this is called Uphill Battles and Changing It Up. times in life you wish the uphill battle didn't seem so steep. You see people's smiling faces on all social media, and that's what you want. How is everyone else so put together with their happiness and their different life, but what you don't get is that at the drop of a hat, at a moment's notice, you can make the decision to change things up a little. Use an accent, wear a wig, or change what you wear, and your personality will follow suit. And what do you know? For a minute, for a day, you can have a whole new identity altogether. People throughout history have done amazing things after they looked at what they were and decided to change their own persona. So, if you think everyone has it so good, then change it up, even for only a day, and see what can happen to you. This was from a feature at Cafe Baloo in Chicago. It appears in the book A Year-Long Journey of the last shows in Chicago before I moved to this pleasantly warm state. Pleasantly. 94. Crazy. This is a short piece that is called Violent Affair. How one-sided is a violent, passionate affair? Is it a small metal boat tied with a long rope to the dock, living to react to the tide, trapped there, pounding against that ocean alone? Then, with the tide rushing in, seeping out rhythmically, waiting for that tide to rush it into the shore, save for that rope holding it back, then being taken away again to do it all over again, spending its time held back and waiting, then almost being turned upside down by that rush, then recovering and waiting for it to all happen again. This is another short one I would like to share with you that is from the cc&d recreation from 2019 of volume 184, which is the May 2008 issue, and it is in a book that is called That Was the Time. Blah. I try to make the face on it. Yeah, please stick your tongue out with me. This is a poem that was from a Dreams series. There was a bunch of them with the same title with a number, and this poem is called She Told Me Her Dreams 1. So we were at some sort of showing, some sort of an exhibit where they were displaying the glass sculpture. It was 83 billion years old, and it was more smooth than anything. And it went on, one smooth curve after another. It was so old. They displayed it on the water. It was a lake or an ocean, and it rested on the water religiously. And I was in the water with someone, a man, I don't remember who, and we were swimming around it, touching it. He was on the other side. He told me to swim under it. I didn't think I could make it across, but I went under. Across I went. I kept feeling the sides, the smoothness. Somehow, transcribed along the sides of this sculpture was a timeline, a record of history. There wasn't much at 83 billion years ago, but there was more and more the closer we got to present. I remember reading Lyndon Johnson's name, and then I saw information about the future. It was all on this glass. I was looking at it, but I can't remember what it says.
And now, for her final appearance this evening,
Janet Kuypers.
Look here.
Our farewell tour.
Her finale performance. I will be doing shorter ones with you for you. This, I would like to share with you a poem that is in every month of the year. Volume 1, January through June. And this poem was written for a day that had 2 different holidays. And so I put them both into this short little poem. This was written on International Panic Day. Did you know that was a thing? International Panic Day. And International Picnic Day. 2 separate things.
Panic at the picnic. There's a story.
So I wrote, "Knowing panic becomes a picnic." So this mentioning the book in this little poem. So it's for this 2 days of celebrations. Knowing panic becomes a picnic. After leaving them and sailing the 7 seas, foraging pirates' caves, swimming through sharks, climbing the Alps, crouching on tops of glaciers, hot tubbing in Russia, scaling the Great Wall of China, I didn't know if my old mates would recognize me after all that had changed me so. So I decided to not touch base. If I ever did, their panic in seeing the life that they never lived might do them in. So I let them think that life is a picnic, that nothing bad could ever happen in their lives because they choose to not live. Because they never will realize that the feeling of panic, this feeling of fear, can really remind you of the times when life really, how valuable life really is. Because after knowing panic, life can become a picnic too. I'm going to read to you 2 poems, and as I mentioned before, if people want an old issue, and the first one that was done, I couldn't believe it, was a May 1996 issue. It was volume 79 of cc&d magazine, and at the time I had clip art that was on the cover, and it just said poetry and prose on it, and I'm like, well, that is the title of this book as a re-release in 2019, Poetry and Prose. And I will read to you a couple of poems from this. First one I'd like to share with you is in a Letters to the Editor section. Here it is for you. And it is called People's Rights Misunderstood. I had a dream the other night. I was walking down the street in the city, and a man came up to me, a skinny man. He lost his hair, and he walked right up to me, and he told me that no one cares anymore. And he took my hand, and he asked me to care about him. I'm not supposed to be like this, he said. I'm not homeless, you know. I have AIDS. And I wanted to tell him that someone did care, that he didn't have to die alone. But you know how sometimes when you can't do something in your dreams no matter how hard you try? Well, my mouth was open. It was wide open, but no words were coming out. You know, I'm afraid to go to sleep tonight. I'm afraid that a pregnant woman is going to come up to me and ask me for a hanger. And I'll tell her that there has to be another way. And she'll tell me that this is the way she chooses. I'm afraid that a woman will come up to me and tell me she doesn't want to live because she's just been raped and their world doesn't make sense anymore. And I'll tell her that she can make it, that 1 in 3 women are raped in their lifetimes and they all make it. And besides, the world doesn't make sense to anyone. And she'll say to me that that doesn't make her feel any better. And I'm afraid that I won't be able to walk down that city in that dream, in the street again, in my dream, without it looking like a Quentin Tarantino movie where everybody's pointing guns at each other. Yes, Mr. NRA, you are so right. I feel so much safer knowing everyone out there now has a gun, and that there are more gun shops than gas stations, and that everyone is so willing to do the killing. It's weird because you have to know about that. You have to, in many states, you have to become somebody that's a license for selling guns, and that doesn't mean there are tons of gun stores around. It's just weird loopholes and laws that things like that exist. And yeah, well, yeah, there's that.
There's that.
Well, there's that. But I tried to not think about that so much. So I thought I'd end on a happier note for you.
Please.
In the back, this one this one is called New Vacuum Cleaner. Elizabeth was only 5. She thought she was doing the right thing. She accidentally sucked up the goldfish when she knocked over the aquarium as she was vacuuming the floor. You see, she was going to surprise Mom and Dad with the clean carpet, but now it's covered in aquarium rocks, shattered glass, and fish water. But she had to try to save the goldfish before she could clean up the mess, so she poured water into the vacuum cleaner to try to give the poor fish something to breathe. Now, Mom and Dad have to get a new carpet, a new aquarium, and a new vacuum cleaner.